Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I've been a yoga teacher for over 15 years while raising my 3 kids who actually are quickly becoming young adults. I want to give a shout out to Wyatt, Colton, and Sage, who are literally my best teachers. As a yoga teacher, I know what it's like to just keep saying yes to everything. I was teaching 16 yoga classes a week. At one point, I was managing 2 different yoga studios, and really to the point of burnout, mentally, physically, and financially. And when I finally figured out how to niche down and build a full-time business, studios and teachers started to ask me how they could do the same. That led to working with hundreds of yoga teachers. And I realized that many of us need resources on building a sustainable business that are also rooted in the teachings of yoga. And that's why this podcast was born. Each and every week, you can stay connected to the information and inspiration that will support you as a yoga teacher and also as an entrepreneur. In today's episode, we are digging into a topic that some people might not feel comfortable talking about: menopause. And isn't this odd that we're not really talking about this all the time when 50% of the world's population menstruates and eventually hits a point of perimenopause and menopause, which in today's episode, you're going to learn is just one day. So because of this lack of communication, it's no wonder that menstruating people often begin perimenopause and reach the point of menopause and have no idea about the actual changes that their bodies are undergoing and how to deal with them. And I'm excited about this topic coming onto the podcast today because if we know that half of the population of our class deal with menstruation and eventually perimenopause and menopause at some point, we know that the other half of our class is likely living with or supporting someone who is dealing with this change in their life. That's why I've invited an expert in this area to bust some of the common myths and old wives' tales surrounding menopause and give us the facts about this quote-unquote taboo topic, and to really talk about how this isn't just the people who will be menstruating in life and then eventually reach menopause that need to know about this. It's everyone on the planet. Think about the people in your life who you are supporting, especially your yoga students. If half of your yoga students at some point in their life are going to reach this one day of menopause, keep that in mind again, and we'll dig into that in today's episode. We want to know how to support these people. Shirley Weir is the Menopause Chick, and she joins me on the podcast today to really dive into all things to do with menopause. We talk about what's normal, common, and what's not during perimenopause leading up to menopause, the difference between perimenopause and menopause, and when to talk to your doctor regarding any symptoms you might be experiencing, and then also educating yourself in case your healthcare team doesn't know the latest research on perimenopause. Another big highlight is that we talk about how yoga can be helpful in bringing relief to people who are experiencing symptoms and some of the things to be aware of as yoga teachers. All of the show notes are ready for you over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/212, and there you can find any links that we talk about today. And also, I don't know if you've checked out the show notes, but there are clickable timestamps. So if you're like me and you think, gosh, I want to go back and hear that one part again, Crunch does an amazing job with the show notes, and you can just click around and find that. And speaking of the amazing job that Crunch is doing, if any of you are looking for someone to write articles and you focus in the health and wellness space, she has one spot open. You can find out more about Crunch on our team page over at theconnectedyogateacher.com. I also want to tell you, in case you don't know and you haven't seen, that Crunch has been writing articles for us for a while now. I have some new ones to get up on the website that she has written. They're amazing. She goes into our Facebook group and really sees what questions are coming up a lot. And based on that, that's where we write our articles. And before we dig right into this interview, I want to give a couple of shout outs. First to Tess Jewel Larson, who left us a review about pelvic health professionals. Tess says, pelvic health professionals is a fantastic group of dedicated professionals all joining in together to explore, learn, and share pelvic health knowledge. Shannon Crow leads the helm with a wealth of expertise and support. I'm so thrilled to be part of pelvic health professionals. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tess, for leaving this review, but also for sharing how pelvic health professionals is supporting you. It means so much. And I'm excited because anyone who's listening to today's episode with Shirley Weir, you can go and learn even more about vaginal health over at Pelvic Health Professionals. So Shirley did a full hour of talk with us. She answered all kinds of questions in that hour, and you can actually access that right now if you go over and join Pelvic Health Professionals. That's over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com and look for the join button. And because you are a podcast listener, I want to tell you that I am raising the rates for pelvic health professionals. I've given myself until the end of March. And that's coming up really soon. So I would say now is a great time if you are wondering at all about joining pelvic health professionals. You can either choose to sign up for the month or the year. You can dive in, and in the first 30 days, that's where you get to check it out and see, is this a resource I would use as a yoga teacher? Is it worth my time and my money that I've invested? I really want people to feel like it's a great fit for them. And if you have any questions at all about pelvic health professionals, you can head on over to our website, pelvichealthprofessionals.com, and there's a little chat bubble down at the bottom of our website. I also want to give a huge shout out of thanks to the team over at Schedulicity. They keep me organized each and every day with my calendar, and so let's hear our hot tip of the week from them.
Hello, Connected Yoga teachers. This is Allie from Schedulicity with the hot tip of the week. We've talked a lot about how Schedulicity can help your class-based business, but we know many teachers also offer one-on-one services like Thai massage. Through your Schedulicity account, you can seamlessly book and manage those services alongside your group classes and workshops. Those calendars are integrated together so you'll never be double booked. If you create a new class that conflicts with another appointment on your schedule, a window will pop up to warn you of the exact dates and times that interfere. We've got your back so you can take care of your clients' backs.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity, for not only sending us the hot tip of the week, but also for bringing this podcast to all of our yoga teachers by being a regular sponsor. Alrighty, Connected Yoga teachers, let's dive in and meet Shirley Weir, who defines herself as the Menopause Chick. More than 10 years ago, when she first began experiencing symptoms related to perimenopause, Shirley was unable to find answers to her questions, and she was left feeling really confused, overwhelmed, and alone. And she realized at that point that other people must be struggling with the same issues. And so she launched MenopauseChicks.com to empower people to talk openly about perimenopause and menopause, and to help them navigate midlife health information and to connect with health professionals in this area. Since then, Shirley has become an international speaker. She's also written a book, MOKITA, and she talks about the name of that book and where it came from in today's episode. And hats off for this book because it reached #1 on Amazon.ca in women's health. Shirley's also known for her private Facebook group with over 25,000 people in there, and this has become the go-to place to get questions answered and to affirm that they are not alone. I am so excited today that we get to dive in, meet Shirley, and explore some of the myths and facts about menopause. And before we do that, I just want to share this one little blurb at the beginning, which Shirley and I actually did at the end of the call. We had a conversation before we started the call about gender-neutral language, and Shirley let me know that a lot of the time she was going to be saying women, and that it's not just women who come to her for help. It is all genders, and also it's people supporting those individuals who are dealing with perimenopause and menopause. Connected Yoga teachers, I wanted to make a note here, and we'll probably stick this at the beginning of the podcast episode. Shirley and I were just talking how our language very much for this episode centers around calling out women in this, but that perimenopause and menopause are not topics that just people who go through perimenopause and menopause need to know about. And also we want to be really just respectful of, the spectrum, the gender spectrum where this might apply to many different people who identify as a different gender. Anything that you would add to that, Shirley?
No, I think you did a fantastic job. And I use the terms women and men. But what's really surprising to me is the number of men who ask me for support and education because they really want to know how they can get informed and support the women in their lives too. So this isn't a gendered conversation, in my opinion, at all.
Right. How amazing would it be if this was the conversation in schools? Okay, here are the phases that you'll go through in life. You'll go through puberty. And then as you age, like these are what we call it. And here's what to expect. We don't do that.
We don't yet.
Yet. We're going to have to dig into a lot. We'll have to contact the education system and our political system.
Okay. Just small to-do items.
Small to do. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Shirley. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited.
Me too. So you and I actually got to meet in person at an event. Shout out to Cindy Solway, because I feel like she was one of the main organizers of that. And you were talking all about menopause in your book.
Yes.
And then I realized, like, you used to live in the area where I live. Tell us, how did you get into this work of really highlighting the information around menopause?
Well, I can tell you for sure that when I was growing up on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, I never imagined growing up and to be a menopause chick.
Right.
But I am. I'm 53 years old, and I have been researching this topic for the better part of the last 10 years. I reached menopause at age 49, which is a little bit below the average. The average in North America is 51. But at 41, I started to experience things that I really knew not too much about. I knew a little bit because I have an older sister, but I didn't really know anything. And I wasn't scared or worried or anything. I went to my doctor. I did what every other smart, savvy woman would do. I went to my doctor and I said, hey, after the pap smear, I sat up and said, I think I'm experiencing maybe the first signs of menopause. And she looked at me and then looked at my chart. And you have to understand, like, I love my doctor, like amazing, 10 years older than me, delivered both my children. I don't go to the doctor very often, but I was expecting that this would just be sort of this amazing sisterhood conversation. And she looked at me and she looked at my chart and she said, oh, you're 41, you're too young. And I was really taken aback by that, Shannon, because I thought, oh, so the sleep disruption, the brain fog, the anxiety and depression for the first time in my life, I must be making that up. That must be all in my head. If I'm too young, then, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? Do I have dementia? I didn't really know how to respond to her. And she went on to suggest that I could go back on the pill, or I could get some sleeping pills, or I could start taking an antidepressant.
Wow.
And that wasn't at all it wasn't at all. I mean, I'd gone for my pap smear. So, to be having this conversation, I was really taken aback. And it was only for a couple of moments that I sat in her office. I probably got up to get dressed and I thought those things, it must be all in my head. And then I realized, I bet I'm not the only one. And that really kind of kick-started Menopause Chicks, which at the time, we're talking now over 10 years ago, blogs were the thing. Everyone was starting a blog. And so I thought, well, that will be my gift to the world. I'll just start a blog. I'll crack open this conversation on menopause and that will save the world. And then I'll get back to my regular scheduled life, which never happened because menopause, the universe responded in some really amazing ways. And I realized that this needed to be my full-time vocation. And so it is.
That's fantastic. Well, you definitely have a gift for getting this information across. I love how when I went for the talk, like I was learning all kinds of things. And I feel like as someone who specializes in pelvic health, I do hear about menopause a lot and the information is out there, but wow, I really learned way more. So I also want to tell our listeners, if you want to go learn more, I feel like your Facebook group is now the replacement of that blog. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, again, so now 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, blogs were passe. Everyone was starting them and then had abandoned them, and everyone was starting a Facebook group. And someone said to me, Shirley, you should have a Facebook group. And I was like, yeah, I should. And so I did recognize the value in having a private group online. There's definitely a glaring gap in women's health information in the first place.
Yeah.
And Dr. Google can send you down some vicious paths. So having a private group where I could curate quality health information for women seemed like a really great platform. And I can tell you, I've never spent a dime in advertising. Like, our group has grown organically. Women recommend each other. I mean, it's just really become a great place for not only getting the quality information to women, but also to highlight health professionals, a lot of pelvic health professionals, I will include that, highlighting the work that they do in supporting women in midlife. And then, of course, we have this community of women who has each other's back. So in some cases, that's just basically saying to another woman, like, I see you. I validate your experience, which, if you go back, even though I loved my doctor and she was doing her job, she was telling me what she had in her toolkit that day. But I wasn't validated. She didn't say, oh, that's really, Shirley, that is really common for women in their early 40s to feel the way that you feel. I didn't get that day. So that's what, online Facebook communities or wherever you're hosting them can really do for other women, because if you're feeling like you're the only one, or you didn't receive this education ever from any source, it's a really great place to kickstart that learning.
Oh, that's so true. So tell us, like, the definition of menopause. This is one thing that I think I learned at the talk with you, or maybe you were on the Sick Boy podcast. If anybody wants to listen to it, we'll make sure to link to it in the show notes. Just be careful if you're listening around young, tender ears, because they really like to swear, which I do love on that podcast.
My podcast, one of my definitely one of my career highlights, I gotta say. The definition of menopause. So let me begin by reciting a quote that I use a lot. It's a Gloria Steinem quote. And it's, anytime we want to learn something, the first thing that we have to do is unlearn what we think we already know. And I was thinking about this when I woke up this morning, Shannon. I was like, if you were my hairdresser and I came in and sat down in your chair and I said, oh, I think I'm experiencing the first signs of menopause, you might be someone who would say, oh, I hear it's awful.
Right.
And so would begin the hour-long conversation of me in your chair getting my hair done. And we would talk about all the negative things around menopause. And there is no real place in our society where we're having positive conversations. So thank you for asking me about definitions. I like to start with definitions first, and then we can, continue the conversation about positive versus negative. But menopause is one day. It's the 12-month anniversary of your final period. And the reason why it's not the day of your last period is that we never know if we're going to get another one. So 12 months is the agreed amount of time that a group of health professionals decided was a good benchmark. Now, we're all different. I might go 8 months without a period and then get it again. I might go 10 months without a period and get it again. But for the most part, when we're talking about natural transition to menopause, it's 12 months from the date of your very last period.
It's hard to plan that party then.
It's hard to plan the party. I did have a party, by the way. I invented a cocktail.
That's amazing.
Only not because that's really who I am. Like, I'm not a person who talked about her periods or any bodily functions, to be honest. But I did feel that if I had a party, it would just be one way where we could pivot that conversation. And there is lots to celebrate. So, but perimenopause is the phase of life leading up to menopause. And it is traditionally defined by fluctuating hormones. So much like a child who is maybe 9, 10, 11 years old, their hormones are fluctuating. Their body is preparing them for puberty. Might not have their period yet, but they're preparing for puberty. Perimenopause prepares you for menopause. And then postmenopause is every day after the cocktail party. So you're in postmenopause for the rest of your life. I am in postmenopause. So the language is really important. You don't necessarily go through menopause, which is an outdated term. You reach it. You do go through perimenopause. It's a phase of life, fluctuating hormones, as I mentioned, different for everyone, might possibly start in your mid to late 30s. And it's not defined by symptoms. And that is something I would really like to include when we're talking about definitions, because so many women will say, oh, I'm not in perimenopause yet. I'm 47. I'm not in perimenopause. Well, yeah, you are. You're just not symptomatic, which is amazing. And 20% of women sail through. 20% of women, they might have like maybe a mild case of PMS that they never had before, or maybe mild changes to their period, but essentially they sail through. And 20% of women have their worlds rocked upside down in perimenopause.
And that's where we hear like the horror stories of like, I can't sleep, hot flashes, like depression, anxiety, those types of things.
Yes. And one of the things that is really predominant in perimenopause, but not discussed, is changes to bleeding. So you may run into women who will disclose, I've been bleeding for 40 days, or I bleed so heavily that I can't leave my house. I can't exercise. I can't come to yoga because I don't think that my Super Plus tampon will make it through the hour. I mean, there are so many women who are dealing with that. And it's usually a case of estrogen dominance, which means that when our periods are regular, we have estrogen in the first 2 weeks of our cycle, and it does its job. And then progesterone comes along in the second 2 weeks and kind of balances that out. But in perimenopause, the ratio of those two hormones can become unbalanced. And that's what kind of wreaks havoc on the quality of our life. And for many women, that is changes to bleeding, PMS, mood swings, sometimes sleep disruption, which can also be related to the stress that women in our age group are under these days. We're all holding up the world right now. So, yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things here. Then you said perimenopause is not defined by the symptoms. So is it like, can we say we're perimenopausal at a certain age then, or is it just kind of a rough age range?
You can say, I will often tell women, like, if you're in your late 40s, you're in perimenopause. It's going to be like puberty, right? So you might line up 2 8-year-old girls and they might look completely different in terms of where they are on their journey. One of them might be getting their period next year at age 9, and one of them might not be getting their period till they're 14. So same thing happens at the other end with women. When I was 41 and I was having those experiences of brain fog, sleep deprivation, mood swings, I might have been starting my perimenopause journey, and I might also have been burnt out.
Right. That's hard to tell, especially this year.
Yeah, especially this year, and a lot of stress in my life. And what we've now learned is that stress significantly impacts female hormones, and it also mimics some of the common experiences that hormone fluctuation and hormone imbalance can bring about. So,
That's amazing.
if that answered your question, the age range for perimenopause is like 5 to 15 years leading up to menopause. So if the average age is 51, subtract 5 to 15. I know that's really, really broad for your listeners, but the important message is just knowing that perimenopause exists. It's a term that was only invented in 1996.
Wow.
Yes.
What?
Yes. We know very little about it. We haven't had a lot of conversations about it. If you think of the grand scheme of things, many of our health professionals were educated before 1996. There's not very much research in women's health in general, and there isn't a lot of research in perimenopause. So you can see how all of these things kind of line up to our conversation today as to why is this such an under-discussed topic or misunderstood topic. Those are some of the reasons for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing information. Also, you really caught my attention with the whole stress thing because if it mimics that and we're not sure is it stress or is it perimenopause,
Yes.
we can definitely look at the benefits of yoga then to really dig into that. Like that is a huge I'm thinking of the students that have come to my class and said to me like, "Don't mind me. I'm going to go to the back of the class. When you see me start peeling off my clothes, I'm just having a hot flash, just I've almost felt like I'm not quite sure how to look after this person. Like I trust that they know how to look after themselves, but there's a moment of like, do I say something? Are they uncomfortable? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Oh, goodness. Do I ever? So media and marketers have really positioned hot flashes and night sweats as the cornerstone of menopause. The reality is, most women who are experiencing hot flashes experience it in that final year of perimenopause, that year without a period. That's the most predominant occurrence of hot flashes. And I was at an event last year that just, I don't know, can I say it? It burnt my ass. Oh my gosh. This panel of experts got on stage and somebody asked a question about menopause and they all started laughing and just laughing at the word menopause, laughing of, oh, I didn't know you were there yet. And isn't that funny? And oh, yes, there was this woman in my office and I saw her one day peeling off all of her clothes. And they all laughed again. And the audience laughed and everyone laughed except for me. And I thought, wow, what, we've just finished talking about mental health. We've just finished talking about other conditions that the workplace and employers are supporting. But yet, when a woman is having a hot flash, her hormones are fluctuating. Where's the support for her? It is not just a matter of, oh, it's hot in here. That woman, I guarantee you, if she slept at all last night, woke up at 3 a.m. This is not the first time she's going through this experience. She's doing the best she can to eat, move, sleep, show up at yoga, and try to take care of herself. And as a society, we're laughing.
Why do you think we're doing that? Why?
Oh, lack of education, ignorance, not intentional ignorance in the real definition of the term. It's like we do not know,
Right.
right?
Well, this is something that my grandmother and my
Yeah.
mom didn't really talk to me about. They didn't really talk to me about menopause.
Yeah, and that's not their fault. Again, like my mother, she might not have had the same stress levels that I had. She ate all of her vegetables out of a garden that she grew herself.
Right.
Like the quality of the food that I consume, the stress level that I've sometimes inflicted upon myself, but also, just our age demographic, all of those things are impacting how a woman is transitioning through midlife. And even if it has zero to do with your estrogen, your progesterone, or your testosterone, it is impacting our cortisol and our adrenal health. So that's where it adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah. Okay, this is good. So we won't blame our ancestors
No.
or even the medical system if they didn't know about the term.
Can't blame the medical system for a couple of reasons. One is perimenopause and menopause are not medical conditions.
Right.
They're phases of life, right? And I know you have kids. I have a couple of young adults now, but I mean, we would never let our kids enter puberty without giving them the age appropriate information, education, and warnings in advance of what's going to happen to their bodies. But yet, if you go to the other end of that hormone teeter-totter, like I was saying, women are waking up in their mid-40s and they're thinking, I'm dying, I have cancer, I'm going to bleed to death. Like there are some women who are really, really shocked and surprised at some of the changes, and nobody gave them any warning. And it's not the medical system's fault necessarily, because they don't get taught about this phase of, they don't get taught hormone balance strategies in medical school.
Right. And we wouldn't blame the medical system for a child not understanding puberty.
No.
Right. So as a society, we need to work on this. What do you think are some of the myths that we need to be aware of as yoga teachers? Like me in that class, or that woman's like, oh my gosh, what do I say to that student? Or what are some of the things that we should, I don't usually should on the podcast, but should or shouldn't say, like, what are some of the...
Okay. So, wow, I got a lot of tips for your yoga teachers, because I think they play such a significant role. It's such an opportunity to shift this conversation. So the first thing I would suggest is to validate the experience, to validate, I see you. Something as simple as that, and then let her go to the back of the class. The second thing is to really check in on your own understanding. Like, what are maybe some of the myths or misconceptions that you've inherited from your mother, your grandmother, from media, from watching Netflix, whatever it is. And one of those myths might be that you just have to get through it. So you'll know this as a pelvic health professional. There's a lot of innuendo around women's health that we are meant to suffer.
Yes.
Right? So my daughter's 17. When she got her period, what did I tell her? I said, oh, you might get cramps. I used to get pains down the front of my legs when I first had my period. So I told her about that. Expect to have pain was the message I gave my teenage daughter. And then we continue that through the rest of our life. Expect that pregnancy is going to be awful, morning sickness, blah, blah, blah. Expect that it'll be painful when you deliver. Expect that you will suffer in menopause. Those are all the messages that we are pinged with for years, for decades. And so I think that the yoga community can they already play such a huge role in supporting women's physical, mental, emotional, sleep health. Like yoga did a world of good for me in terms of influencing positive sleep habits. And so if we can shift that and help women understand that, you're not meant to suffer.
Right. Oh, this is so good. And this isn't ignoring the pain or the suffering that people have.
Not at all.
Like I love how you started that with like, I see you. And there are times when I see this as a pelvic health professional and a yoga teacher who specializes in this. Someone will come to me dealing with perimenopausal symptoms. Now I'm going to change my language because I want to say menopause, dealing with menopause. Right. I guess I would use the same language that they use with me. Or dealing with something like endometriosis. We've talked about it on the podcast, and this is one of the times where often women are not diagnosed with endometriosis for, I think it's 11 years
Yes.
is the average, because we just think, okay, we're supposed to suffer when we get our period.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just that the concept of I need to suffer as well as I just need to get through it. So that we need to make a mental shift around that as well. Too many women believe that, oh, this will get better with time.
Okay, so tell me, I'm so curious.
The message that I want every woman to know about that is there are many things that will get better with time. Your mood might get better with time. Your PMS is going to dissipate with time, right? Your sleep might get better. However, working in a pelvic health professional is that there's definitely things that when the engine light comes on in your car, if you ignore it, it is likely not going to get better with time. And so we need to shift women's perspective on this because we're the first generation of women to turn 50 and have 50 more years to plan for. A century ago, women lived to be 50. 58 was an old woman.
Wow.
And now we expect to live to be 85, 100. I say 100. But if you go into a senior's home right now or a retirement community, you will see predominantly women. We still outlive men by a few years. However, a large majority of those women are challenged with what?
Incontinence,
dementia, heart disease and stroke, and the vitality and the quality of life has been diminished. Now, if we could back that up to you or I, what if hot flashes were like the engine light coming on in your car? If we equated hot flashes with, oh, I have a hormone imbalance. If I balance my hormones, I am not only increasing the quality of my life now, but I'm investing in my future heart health and brain health and vaginal health. And those things are going to make sure that I can thrive in my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond.
Oh, this is so good. I didn't think of this. Like, honestly, when you were telling me it's about a year where you'd have those hot flashes, I was really starting to think, well, that's kind of like you just have to get through this year. So I love this analogy because that's the first place my brain went to.
Yeah, the word that I like to use a lot is invest. And we talked about sex education or preparing our children for puberty. All of us, 100% of us listening to this call today have heard that we should put money away for our child's education. And we've heard that we should contribute to an RSP. Why? Because when we get to retirement age, we're going to still want to withdraw funds to enjoy life. Now, what if we use that concept of investing with our health? What if I invest now in my hormone balance so that I can reap the ROI in brain health and heart health and vaginal health and bone health? We didn't mention bone health. That's another, definitely what you put in, you get back out in your later years. So invest.
Oh, I love this so much. And I'm feeling this immense amount of gratitude to Barb Elias, who did some coaching at one point. She's a yoga teacher, an amazing friend, and she did some coaching and she needed like a guinea pig. And I said, I'll do it, not knowing what I was in for. And a big part of that was like, okay, Shannon, you need to build in more self-care. And it was such a struggle for me to find like 5 or 10 minutes in the morning. That felt like too long. And now, that's stretched out. And I really do feel the benefits of that investment. And it wasn't that easy. Like, it was hard because I think my brain as a mom, as an entrepreneur, raised in this society of like, your worth equals what you get done in a day. All of these things were sitting in my brain.
It's not easy, but you are worth it.
Yeah.
And yoga is definitely, like what if you looked at every single person that walked into your class as, oh, my investors are here. Like they're there, they're showing up because the TV flashed a campaign that said, you must contribute by February 28th.
Oh, that's so good.
It's a hypothetical campaign that we don't have yet, but it's an analogy that I think is worth spreading the word about.
It sure is. I think our yoga teachers could really benefit and use some of your words here. Like, you're not a yoga teacher, and so I'm sure they could, work on these words of investment and talk to their students in that way. That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you think is a misconception or a mindset thing that we can look at as yoga teachers?
Well, we touched upon it a little bit, and I think that one of the other major myths in our society is that if something goes south, if something goes wrong or starts disrupting my life, my doctor will know what to do. And that's not entirely true. So your health professional might be trained in hormone balance, and they might not. And to take that a step further, your health professional might be the kind of person who says, you know what, that's not my wheelhouse. I didn't study that in medical school, but I am going to point you in the direction of somebody who is a hormone balance expert.
Who are those people?
Well, that's a great question. And I will answer that. The other thing, the opposite of that is that your health professional might not say, that's not my area of expertise.
Right.
They might only share with you what they have in their toolkit, which is a referral to a specialist or a prescription pad.
Right.
Right. And we need to learn, to be your own best health advocate, you need to know what your values are, and you need to know what the professional in front of you has to offer. The same way that you would hire a tradesperson for your house, to work on your house, right? You wouldn't ask the electrician to do the plumbing.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So if you can build yourself a team, and now I will answer that question about how do you find a hormone balance expert, because it is also a bit of a myth or misconception that a certain designation, that a certain set of letters after someone's name will guarantee you that they are trained in hormone balance. And that's unfortunately not true. So your physician, if they take extra training, if they go through the North American Menopause Society certification program, if they invest their own time and money, they may be the best person for you. You have to ask. You have to interview them like you would interview any other professional that you're hiring. What's your education? What's your expertise? And what's your patient panel look like? Are you currently working with a lot of women in their mid 40s, 45 to 54? Because that will tell you a lot about what they know. It might be a naturopath. It might not be a naturopath. So you have to, again, ask. Many naturopaths are trained in hormone balance, and the women in the Menopause Chicks community gravitate towards those professionals because they get results. They get to sit down with somebody for an hour who really sees them, validates their experience, and knows how to support their hormone health. It might be a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse. And then I wrote a book a couple of years ago and with 13 women's health professionals for this very reason. I wanted to share with women what a variety of modalities, what they can do to support your midlife health transition. And I included obviously a doctor and a naturopath. I included a pharmacist. Pharmacists have so much information that we don't tap into. A registered dietitian, a pelvic health professional, an acupuncturist, because women are curious, I've heard acupuncture might support my hot flashes, for example. And I wanted them to learn about what that modality could do in terms of supporting hormone balance, but also read case studies. Women love to see case studies and go, oh my gosh, that sounds just like me. And how did she solve it?
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic. I love how you said interview those people. It's the same in our yoga teacher world. Like all of our training is very different. Even if
Yes.
we take that first, 200-hour training. And in the pelvic health professional world, I mean, everyone really that you work with, your massage therapist, you might be like, oh, I didn't like that person. I'm going to go to this person instead. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So we're definitely empowering our students. Is there any language so we can work on like the language around menopause, understanding that it's just that one day and then you're postmenopausal, and also not painting it as a doom and gloom. A lot of our yoga teachers in the Connected Yoga Teacher group have shared how it isn't a doom and gloom. And we did an episode with Leslie Kazadi, and she really highlighted her experience of menopause and said that she just felt like, the fog lifted and things really improved then. Connected Yoga Teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment just to let you know that the link for the other menopause episode that we did with Leslie Kazadi is in the show notes. So it's episode 56. It's a great episode to go along with today's episode. Is there anything else that you think would empower us as we work with people one-on-one or in groups?
Yeah, definitely. So if we were to step outside right now and put a microphone in someone's face and say menopause, we would both see those thought bubbles rise above someone's head. I can see it as plain as day. They immediately go to words like hot, old, tired, bitchy, and fat. Right?
It's so true.
It's so true because the magazine headlines, the media, that's what we've been fed. If you Google perimenopause, you're either going to come across a gray-haired woman holding a fan, or you're going to see a woman sitting on the side of her bed with her partner in the background. And the caption essentially reads, she doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. Those are the images that we are fed around perimenopause and menopause. And so if your listeners could do me a huge favor and just continue to honor and recognize the fact that we are the smartest we have ever been. Today, we are all the smartest we have ever been in our lives, and start shifting the language from hot to whole and from bitchy to beautiful. If you've never called yourself beautiful before, then today is an awesome day to do that. And I do hear from a lot of women who have either challenged that language or made the shift themselves, like the example that you just gave, where they realize, oh, you know what? I don't care about that anymore. Or I've just learned that no is a complete sentence. Or maybe it's even more dramatic than that. Women will come to me and say, Shirley, I worked for the government for 30 years. And what I really want to do is to be a florist. And so I've quit my job and I've started a new business. And I'm like, that's amazing. I have women who are leaving their relationships excited about it. I have women who are changing teams, right? Like they're just like, I've spent this part of my life doing this, and I have a whole other part of me that I want to embrace. And so that's why I use the word confidence a lot, because I think that our confidence barometer gets turned up at this phase of life.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's so good. I was just listening to a study on happiness, and they were talking about how it's kind of this U shape. We're happy when we're children. We go through this dip, and I'm really curious now if this dip, because it's around our 40s, has to do with those hormone changes and then that uprise. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, I was significantly influenced early on by a TED Talk by Jane Fonda, and she just very plainly explained that we are so conditioned that it's a hill. It's like over the hill, right? Whatever birthday it is, they have the black banners and it's all doom and gloom. Once you reach that certain point, Everything's going to slide south. And she changed that thinking to it's a set of stair steps. And every year, every day, every decade, however you want to measure it, we are climbing. We are investing. We're learning more. We're smarter. We're changing perspectives. We're changing the world. Whatever it is that we're doing as women, we're climbing a set of stairs.
That's amazing. I love that set of stairs. And I think back to Mia's early 20s. Oh my gosh. I could have really helped myself if I could have just downloaded all of that information that I would learn along the way. Is there anything else that you think applies to a yoga class or to someone who is feeling like, oh my gosh, I have these things I'm dealing with that are new, these symptoms? We know that the language is not, you just have to get through it.
Yeah.
What do you often tell people when they come to you and they say, like, I just can't handle this right now, it's too much?
I use phrases like, what you're experiencing is common. You're not alone. Those are really powerful. That's a really powerful phrase for someone to hear. You're not meant to suffer. Really important to reiterate, because that's a big shift for someone to realize, oh, and then appreciate the fact that it does involve a lot of work. And sometimes it involves quite a bit of money. And I don't know that that is discussed enough. Navigating perimenopause to menopause can be expensive. And so we have women who are making health decisions based on very little resources available to them. They might have to make a decision about their health through, we're in Canada, we both live in Canada, so we can go to our doctor and not pay out of pocket. We can get certain prescriptions without paying out of pocket. But that if we want to see a naturopath, if we want to invest in, a good quality magnesium to supplement, for example, because we know that's good for our brains and good for our sleep, $30 or $40 a month, sometimes, it's just not possible for everyone. And so it's not an equal playing field. And I think that that's a really important conversation for maybe the students in your yoga class, but also for those students to take back home with them, take back to their community or their workplace or their families, and try to communicate that, how privileged we are sometimes to be able to be engaged in these activities that support our health.
Right. Oh, that is a great conversation all on its own of like the privilege that we might have or might not have and might not be able, like I appreciate that you brought up it being expensive. There was a country just recently that is paying for all period supplies, all menstrual supplies.
Scotland, I think.
Scotland?
Yeah.
And I was really impressed. I was kind of like, what the heck? Like I had to pay for all of that.
I know.
And I was feeling a bit like, is that going to happen around the world? And this is making me think even more. Maybe this is something that our healthcare system, I mean, we are really lucky in Canada. I realize that.
Well, we tell ourselves that.
Right.
I'm not arguing with that. This is a different ball of wax, though.
It is.
This isn't a condition.
Right.
It's not a disease. We are not broken. We don't need to be fixed, usually.
Right.
Right? What we need is to be supported. And imagine if we can preempt this phase of life with quality information, education, and empowering conversations. We can preempt a lot of the suffering. We can then preempt absenteeism from work or presenteeism, when women show up for work, but they can't get anything done while they're there because the brain fog is so bad and the sleep is so bad. We can actually boost our communities because the stronger that women in midlife are and the more confident they are and the quality of their health, then we can take better care of our aging parents. We can take better care of our children. We can accept that invitation to volunteer for the community organization, because we actually will have some energy left in the tank at the end of the day.
So good. We'll have to get our politicians listening to this episode. um, if our yoga teachers want to learn more, what is your website and where should they go? What resources really could help them?
Sure. So they can find me anywhere on social media at Menopause Chicks. I host a private online community. We have 26,000 members in there right now. I believe it's on Facebook. The URL is menopausechickscommunity.com. I wrote a book.
Oh, yes. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so it's called MOKITA. I'm sorry we didn't talk about mokitas, but do you know what a mokita is?
No, and I feel like this is this your cocktail or something that you were talking
It's
about?
not, but it's a great name for a cocktail. MOKITA is a word that found me, and it's from Papua New Guinea, and it means, literally translated to, the truth we all know but choose not to speak of.
Oh my goodness. I
Yeah.
had no idea that was the meaning, and I have your book.
So there's a tribe in Papua New Guinea that measures their own health based on how many mokitas they have. So that are, all the elephants in the room. And that could be perimenopause and menopause are examples of MOKITA, although I do believe that there is more and more conversation thanks to podcasts like this. But it can also be like religion, money, marriage, there's lots of mokitas. And so imagine if we actually measured our own health based on those things that we don't talk about or only know a little bit about. So not a big marketing budget to tell the world about what MOKITA means, but I love the word and I continue to love the word. And in the Menopause Chicks community, we talk about hormone balance a lot, but we're also working really hard to make sure that women, as they plan to turn 50, are aware of those opportunities to invest in their health. So you might say, oh, I slid through perimenopause, and that's amazing because, of course, we know that not everyone suffers, but we still need to make a conscious effort, for example, to invest in our brain health.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, that's so true. That is so true.
Or vaginal health is another example. And I hope we have another opportunity to talk about that. But, you can slide through perimenopause and then suddenly, late 50s, realize that incontinence is a challenge for you, or vaginal dryness is a challenge for you. And you're like, what? I thought I was doing okay here. So, just having those conversations and making sure that there are no elephants in the room is really important.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you for making a safe and very educated space for these conversations to happen. Like, your group is tremendous. I know you spend a lot of time and energy in that group, and it really is evident that you're connecting people with that information and other health professionals and people to say, like, you're not alone. So I recommend that our yoga teachers go and check it out and join it so you're prepared and ready, and you can also help your yoga students. Thank you so much, Shirley.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh my goodness, connected yoga teachers. Thank you so much for being here for this conversation with Shirley Weir. I think it is so important that we are educated as humans walking on this planet, let alone as yoga teachers who are supporting people who are going through and dealing with different symptoms of perimenopause and then postmenopause. Thank you again, Shirley, for all of your time and wisdom that you shared in today's episode. And I want to tell you, connected yoga teachers, that if you would like to learn more from Shirley, like I said, we have a full hour of Q&A with her inside of Pelvic Health Professionals. And I want to share with you a couple of key takeaways in this. So the one that Shirley talked about today in today's episode, but also in our talk inside of Pelvic Health Professionals, is just how menopause is this one day on our reproductive calendar, and that's 12 months after our final period. And then that leads us into being postmenopausal the next day. So I feel like I really want to highlight this in our language. I know that I have had to look at my language even with this intro and outro. we're so used to saying in society, the symptoms of menopause, but instead to switch our language and be talking about going through and the symptoms of perimenopause. So Shirley goes more in depth in that inside of the talk in Pelvic Health Professionals. And also we really focused on vaginal health. And Shirley shocked us all saying that there's this statistic that less than 4% of people experiencing vaginal dryness are getting help with it. And yet it's so uncomfortable and it really impacts movement and lifestyle a lot. Shirley realized all of a sudden when she started her Facebook group how many people were talking about this finally when she created this safe space to have this conversation. And she really goes into what she has learned about vaginal health and the problems that come along with vaginal dryness. She talks how vaginal health relates to brain health and also how important it is for many other things like preventing incontinence, preventing UTIs, really how that entire health of the vagina is so important. So many of our members then had questions for Shirley about lubricants and what to do for vaginal dryness. And it's fascinating, like looking at a study that Shirley talked about all the way to where her entire community of people who are very into working on this, health professionals, all the way to the people in her community who are saying like, I need help with this problem of vaginal dryness. As this result, her community co-developed a product and she talks about it in that talk. It was really very fascinating to see how a community of individuals, a lot of women in that community, can work together to create a product that solves the problem. And one of my biggest takeaways from that talk inside of Pelvic Health Professionals and today is probably just this whole, how can we create positive conversations with our clients around perimenopause and menopause? Conversations that are actually based in fact, because there was a study that Shirley told us about inside of Pelvic Health Professionals that it's only 20% of the population that deals with symptoms that are problematic with perimenopause. And this time in our life gets a really bad rap. So I'm hoping that this talk today, fired you up to learn more, informed you if you felt like you were missing out on this information, which I definitely felt like, where was this information as I'm in my 40s now? So I'm excited about it and I'd love to hear from you as well. If you want to share feedback, you can do that in the show notes. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/212, there's a place for comments at the bottom. And also share comments in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. And if you haven't joined yet, you can head on over to theconnectedyogateacher.com and there's a join button right on our homepage. I also want to refer you to a podcast that we did with Tristan Katz, episode 195 on LGBTQ awareness for yoga teachers. This episode and the learning that I've done inside of Pelvic Health Professionals, we did a 2-hour training inside of Pelvic Health Professionals focused on transgender competency, enables me to feel like I can actually use my words in this, where I'm not always saying like menopause, perimenopause, menstruation is all something that only women deal with. We know that that is an outdated way to look at things. And I feel like it's so important if we're working with individuals, that means all of us yoga teachers, that we really understand and learn what language to use so that we're not causing harm. I'll make sure to link to those in our show notes. And if you have any questions at all, you can always reach out to me. I love your questions. Your questions are what really enable us to create this podcast. It's based all on the questions that we're hearing from yoga teachers. There's a way to leave us a voicemail right from our website. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, look for the button on the right. I love voicemails. And also there's a contact form on there, or you can tag me in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. Now, if you would like to hang out in person, there are a couple of ways that we can actually do this live and online. So first is a workshop, a training that I am doing on April the 7th, 2021 at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's all about pelvic girdle pain. So your yoga students who are dealing with hip pain, low back pain, SI joint stuff, sciatic pain, feeling like their pelvis is unstable or wobbly, your prenatal and postnatal students. So many of our students, I would just say, and this is not a scientific study that I've done, 100% of our students at some point in time deal with pelvic girdle pain. I myself have dealt with pelvic girdle pain since having my children over 20 years ago, and I've learned so much along the way. We're going to get into every aspect of this, from like what's in our scope of practice as yoga teachers to what movements help, what movements are actually not helpful, and what language can be really not helpful as we're working with someone who's dealing with pelvic girdle pain and possibly someone with persistent pain that's in the pelvis. To sign up for that, you'll go to Pelvic Health Professionals and look for the pelvic girdle pain training. A little insider note: if you join Pelvic Health Professionals, it's included in your membership. So if you're like, you know what, I want the talk with Shirley, I want access for a full month and this training, the best value is going to be to join Pelvic Health Professionals. Also, at the end of April, we are doing a sketching yoga sequences with Eva Lotta, who we heard from last week on the podcast. That's April 30th. All of the information for that is over at theconnectedyogateacher.com. Look under trainings and events. This is where we're going to live and online learn how to draw simple and clear stick figures that enable us to really think about yoga asana and sequences in a whole new way. I'm looking forward to this. I feel like it's going to be such a fun time to hang out together and learn together. And you might be able to make fun of my stick figure drawing in the process. I am not known for my artwork, friends. Alrighty, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone over here on the Connected Yoga Teacher team for making today's episode possible. And thank you for being here. You, don't tell anyone else, are our favorite listener. And I also want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?